Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. This is Mr. Middlepath, and today's video is subscriber requested. So I had a subscriber who gave me a shout out and told me, hey, check out this guy's channel. His name is Dan, and he's run something called the DMT laser experiment. Now, as you guys know, on this channel, I do a lot to try and expose and refute the New Age movement, psychedelic drug culture, because they're all connected, as well as some other movements that I feel are all one and the same phenomenon or describing the same phenomenon. So this definitely caught my intent. I took a look at it. And I'll share the video of the man named Dan in a little bit, as well as some of his thoughts and beliefs. And what he believes he's seen is that when you are on the psychedelic drug DMT and you refract a laser onto a door, or onto a wall, or through glass, you see code running through the laser, or running behind the laser. As it says, you see through the laser, not on the laser. So you see some type of code, almost like Neo from the Matrix, right? When he put on the glasses, or when throughout the movie, he'd be able to see the code behind that was running the Matrix, right? And he has come to the interesting conclusion that we live in a simulation. And by that, he doesn't mean that this world isn't real, but that it's simulated by a higher civilization. This is his belief. Now, for those of you who are watching whose instinct is to laugh at him or make fun of him, let's try and hold off on this and try and have a constructive discussion, because I do want to help out everyone who's watching these videos. And without further ado, let's watch his video.
One of the most important things to pay attention to is that you're looking through the laser, not at the diffraction pattern that falls on the wall. So even if you're sitting 2 or 3 feet away, like we're seeing here, you want to be looking at beyond the light, looking through the window versus looking at the surface of the window. Also notice how wide the diffracted pattern of the laser is on the wall. People that choose lasers that produce this thing that just looks like one line, that's not wide enough for you to see anything, because you're looking beyond the laser, not at the surface. So it will be too thin, too narrow of a crack to look through, so to speak. You can come closer like this, and I would recommend to cover one eye so the light doesn't hit your cornea. And then you would be looking from the side. Is that you want to stay with it until you start seeing digits. The separation between just seeing the structures and seeing the digits is total. When you still see the structures, it's possible to imagine that these structures are due to the influence of DMT in your brain while you're looking at a stochastic pattern. But when you see the digits, this hypothesis becomes much less tenable. You will notice some motion. Stay with that motion. The digits are usually much smaller than people expect. So keep looking until you see actual digits running. Numerals and what seems like Japanese katakana characters.
All right, guys. So as you saw, you have the refractive laser on the wall, and you can see code running through it. Now we're going to watch another video, right, where he explains what he makes of this conclusion, right, and what he's trying to achieve by sharing this video with everybody.
Hello everyone, this is the second video in the series. One of the women that I was showing the discovery to, she said, it looks like we're looking through a microscope. And I immediately thought, this is exactly right. That's exactly what it feels like and exactly what it looks like. And in fact, this analogy between the discovery of the microscope by Anthony van Leeuwenhoek and what I found runs very deep. Problem is the definition of the word simulation. It is true that, I'm sure everybody realized this, is that what we perceive at the moment, even without the simulation theory, is in fact some kind of a rendering. The brain simply overlays the content of how it distinguishes between things through different senses and the picture that it can construct into this, what Donald Hoffman calls desktop. But reality itself, we all understand it doesn't look this way. The only question is, what is the nature of the structure behind the rendering, the simulation that our brain is doing? What I'm adding, however, is that somebody is actually simulating the space.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So we're back, and there's a couple of points here to make, right? Is that this pattern, right, is very important pattern to notice, right? So people, when they take DMT, report seeing entities, right? And here on Mr. Middlepath, on my channel, right, I take the position that the entities that people experience when they're on these type of drugs are actually very real, right? I take a position that they are not to be trusted either, right? Because as in Islam, we believe that they're jinns. We made a whole long video, right, hours long, to prove that not only are these jinns, right, but the type of substances that people take, such as DMT and ayahuasca, these things are actually substances that shamans would take to communicate with what they called the gods. So they take these substances to communicate with the gods and so forth, right? And not just me as a Muslim would say this, but many other researchers, specifically some very big name researchers who researched the UFO phenomenon, to similar conclusions. One of these was written by Jacques Vallée, a French author who worked for the equivalent of the French version of NASA. And he wrote many different books on the subject, but one of these books was called Messengers of Deception, in which he took a look at UFO contacts and contactees. And I will get to this in a moment, why we're talking about UFOs and how it's connected. We're talking about UFO contacts and contactees and how the pattern was always the same. So for example, and the pattern was the same, and it was very similar to paranormal events. So whether you took a ghost, meeting someone and speaking with them, whether it was what someone would call an angel, quote unquote, or a being of light, or whether it was a demon, or whether it was a UFO, the pattern of the contact was always the same, regardless if the content or the words were different, but the pattern was very similar, right? So here we have something similar here in this DMT laser experiment, right? In which, just like someone who is a medium, right? So these are those type of people that sit down and have a spirit go in their body, and then they start writing things down and they say, oh, I have this new knowledge, right? Check it out, everyone. Here's this new knowledge. Sometimes people say it's a ghost. Sometimes people say it's a spirit. Sometimes even people say it's an alien that went in their body and they started writing down new information. Religious cults have started this way. And sometimes just people would have this contact experience. Maybe they see an alien, right? Or they see they have a UFO encounter and the alien maybe shows them a machine, right? Or some type of engine. And they spend their whole life trying to build this engine that never really gets built, right? Or there's this cult that makes these predictions and these predictions never really come true, right? But what happens is hype around the movement, people get interviews, people spread the message, so then it embeds itself in the conscious mind, right? So then we have this experience here where it's very, very similar, right? Someone saying he has a brand new discovery. We have a lot of numbers behind behind the laser refraction, which must mean that there is something to this, right? And just like the person who sees the engine in a UFO encounter and tries to rebuild it, or sees some type of technology and tries to do it, or the medium or the contactee who gets some type of revelation or some type of prediction, and they build a whole movement around it, eventually nothing comes to pass, because this is the pattern. And Dan, if you're watching this, I hope that you take note, and I hope you read some of the books that I recommend, such as Jacques Vallée's Messengers of Deception, right? Because even in your video, right, and there was one video where you mentioned that people not only see numbers behind the laser refraction, but they also see faces as well. So clearly the entity experience is still there, right? So the pattern I want everyone to take note of when it comes to psychedelic drugs is that, number one, people, regardless of whether they see entities or not, right, will have some positive realizations about their life. They might be depressed, they might be in a dark hole, they might be just going through some type of negative influence. And these drugs help them see things from a different perspective, in which they say, wow, this drug really helped me see things from a different perspective. I'm now over my depression, or I'm over my problem, whatever my problem was, whatever my obstacle was. And they might either thank the drug, and if they didn't see entities, or they might thank the entities if the entities came and talked to them or whatever, right? And we'll get to videos on entities later, right? This creates buy-in between the user and the drug. So now they have a relationship, a positive relationship. The second thing is the entities or the influence that the person has under the drug, if they don't see entities, unhinges them from reality in some way, right? And I know that you might not like to hear this if you're watching this, but the person is unhinged from reality and from his creator in multiple different ways. It could be, number one, that you believe that you are a god, right? It could be that you believe that the entities are a god. It could be that you believe that everything is God. We're all one and the same. It's all energy that is kind of expanding into each other, and there's no difference between you and I, right? That's a type of self-negating type of belief, right? It could be even that we run in a simulation, right? And I'm not saying this to make fun of you. I'm just saying that this is a reality. That if you believe we live in a simulation, this will unhinge you from reality to a certain extent, right? Because it's less real now, or the reality is of a different nature, wherein this type of belief introduces moral relativity. Moral relativity meaning that morals, as we see it, good and bad, are not concepts that have the same value anymore. It's all blended in and merged into one, right? So you get unhinged from reality, and that could happen in a multiplicity of different ways. And this is why people wrote books like Messengers of Deception or the Trojan Horse Operation, wherein they noticed that these UFO contacts have a similar pattern, but a different message, but the result is the same, right? The third thing that happens after this unhinging of reality, which allows these entities or these drugs to have a further hold on your mind and more power over your mind, is mental instability. This is the third point that happens. It's mental instability. And generally speaking, the user will experience some type of regret. But if they're very deep into this, they will usually excuse it away with any type of excuse, such as, well, you know, this time the spirits weren't good to me, or the entities weren't good to me because I came out with the wrong intention, or I did too much. So there will always be an excuse. And this denial phase, right? This denial phase is one of the most difficult things to deal with for me when I talk to other people about this, because this same pattern is the same for in Hinduism religion, for yogis, for Buddhists, for New Age philosophies, for the occult, right? And even yogis talk about this, to become one with the gods, right? To become one with the entities, right? Which would be the third step. Third step being one with them. Essentially, you give your mind to them, right? And this is where the mental instability comes. We'll have to showcase this and demonstrate this in many other videos, right? We'll be talking about this and showing this. So my advice to you, Dan, is to first of all think about where do we see code and Japanese katakana and all of these things. This is actually very, very popular, that aliens and UFO ships on their controls and their control boards have Japanese katakana looking figures. I'm not saying it's exactly Japanese figures, but figures that look like that. That's always on the control boards. Take a look, for example, at Ice Age and Scrat, the squirrel, when he's messing around with the controls in the UFO. You could see the figures. Just take a look. So you notice on the left, we're going to see the Japanese looking symbols. Not only that, but when you look at some of the alien symbology or alien language in some of these UFO contact experiences, it's going to be something similar to that. So always just understand that always in these type of contact experiences, there's always some knowledge that's just out of reach. There's always some type of language that's just out of reach, or some type of discovery just out of reach that never actually happens, right? It just gains hype and gets people more bought into and more under the entity's influence, right? And we believe this in as Muslims, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about the creation of jinn. Jinn were created from fire, right? So they're created out of a type of energy, and that they try and influence man to do certain things. And specifically the shayateen, the devils of the jinn, who are the evil ones, will try and misguide people into believing other than God. And they do this by many different ways, because the falsehood is many, but the truth is only one. So this falsehood, so they don't care how you don't believe in God, as long as you don't believe in God. So if you believe that God is one with everything, this is a very clever way of negating the existence of God, right? By saying that everything is God. Believing that God doesn't exist, believing that we run in a simulation run by a higher civilization, which is again ignoring all of the abundance of natural evidence that we have of a creator, right? So to ignore all of that evidence that we have a creator, and to go after the minutia, right? Like code in a wall. You left off the complexity of the human body, right? The complexity of the human body, the complexity of the universe, the complexity of life around us, right? And how something doesn't come from nothing. You left all of this complexity off to believe that we run in a simulation. And one of your evidence points is that there's writing in the wall. But many people, when they take DMT, see entities, they see different types of beings, they see different types of patterns, right? But what's very telling is the significance that they attach to it. So it's not just, hey, these entities are real. It's these entities are gods. These entities are spirit guides. These entities are going to teach me things, right? So they attach a very extreme significance to them that doesn't belong to them, right? If you see code in the wall, it's not just, hey, simply, hey, I'm under the influence of DMT. This might be their language, or this might be their writing that I'm seeing, or they're messing with my mind so that I can see a certain thing, because not everyone sees that. There's multiple people who've done your experiment who haven't seen it yet, right? Some people take hours before they see it. And not only that, the idea of the Japanese katakana is in popular culture already. So it's embedded deep into our subconsciousness, right? So it's not that you associated a minimal significance to it. On your website, you called it the code of reality, right? So you attached an extreme significance to this and called it the code of reality, which is something that follows. You are, like, Dan, I'm saying this not for you to get upset, but I'm trying to tell you that you are literally following the pattern that has been described by many different researchers into this, the pattern of the UFO contactee, of attaching extreme significance to these messengers of deception, following wholeheartedly down the rabbit hole, whatever information they're feeding you, and you will achieve nothing at the end, just like everybody else who went down these rabbit holes, whatever those rabbit holes were, whether it was a machine that they were being showed, a language that they were being taught, a prediction that was being made. It always ended up as nothing in the end. But what happened is they gained something from you. They gained more people into their space by taking DMT. Those entities gained control over you, influence over you, and influence over the people that you're influencing. So it's a very clever game, which you're not going to win, right? We will take another deep dive into this and look more into the whole nature that people have with DMT, psychedelic drugs, and the entities, and why they shouldn't be trusted, and why the conclusions that we come when we're under the influence shouldn't be trusted either, right? Because there's no way to verify their trustworthiness. Take care. Peace out. Assalamu alaikum. I hope this was helpful.